Welcome back, everybody. Today we have two things to talk about. Somewhat of a emergency-ish adjustment, but not really emergency, just a development change for HECATE alongside the World Arena 2025 season, review. Both of which I think are quite interesting, and I'll break down everything that was basically mentioned or talked about, or what I found to be kind of relevant to go over. Without further ado, though, let's start by talking about the HECATE skill adjustment. Now, first and foremost, this was an apology that the dev team issued after the December 3rd showcase, and I guess through the commentary, the feedback of the community, essentially the feedback that they took away from this was that it failed to address concerns about the balance, the performance of this character, and I guess some of the warfare rules in the future. Now, to be honest, this is already shocking because this is not necessarily something I would have expected from them. But with this, they are first now changing her skill, or rather her unable to be revive or unable to allow enemy heroes revive and no immortality passive to now affect all heroes in the game. Now, when I previously talked about HECATE, I thought this might have been an issue, or it felt a little bit unfair that Briarwitch Iceria had a passive that effectively did this, but in essence for HECATE, this was not the case. With this, they've specifically mentioned that, well, the fact that this character has it and no other character effectively has this sort of balance feels really unfair, and so they are changing this. Now, in addition to this, they've also recognized and kind of talked about the sets a bit. Effectively what they stated here was that speed set is super dominant, and it kind of makes the progression of the game feel kind of, I guess, uncomfortable or stagnant. However, in addition to this, they also mentioned that adding 3 sets at once will obviously make farming, I guess, feel way more annoying, which I understand. I agree, definitely. But this also adds unintended, effects to your account as well, including like inventory management or pressure and things like resource drain, all of which are, I guess, basically things that they wanted to talk about here. There isn't really like a specifically mentioned adjustment or feature for this, but just the fact that they acknowledge and they're trying to balance things a little bit better, which is fine, whatever. But as a result, from what I understand, though it's not a direct fix at the moment, they're going to remove the acceleration set for now, which again still has you have 2 sets that will be released. But in addition to this, future sets will only be specialized, they'll only be needed in small quantities, and they aren't broad replacements that every single character in the game will need. They also tried not to invalidate they're trying not to invalidate your existing gear, and they'll balance around this. And finally, additional Leaf support events will now accompany new set releases to reduce how much you need to farm. But again, in terms of like a raw right now change, this isn't necessarily, I would imagine, what some of you are maybe still waiting for, though I think this is definitely a great direction to be heading down. Now, in addition to this, they also talked about the warfare rules for spring 2026. This debuted in fall 2025 for Champion Plus players, and the feedback was that certain rules felt super overpowered, like the defense rule, as I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with, or they felt too weak or no one even used them, which is basically all the others, or including offense and the weakening one. With this, though, they're now changing the rules to be rebalanced to main strategy, and without necessarily making one or a few characters overly dominant or be overly countered, but this is a system that obviously needs time to improve, so they ask for feedback and your patience. Now, with this, they've also announced, they've kind of addressed the fact that E7 has had power creep that's been accelerated over its lifespan, and no one, I think, is ignoring or necessarily denying this. And they've definitely admitted as well that some new characters are obviously launched stronger than intended, which makes metas kind of circle around them, and we'll talk about this more with the World Arena infographic in a moment. Their past approach, though, was to counter heroes with new strong heroes, which doesn't work at some point, obviously, because then what? Like, a character just has to be invincible, one shot you, defense pen, defense break, all these different things all at the same time, which is crazy. But their changes, or their planned changes for the future, are going to be to reduce the impact of multi-role heroes that do everything too well, which is honestly insane in a positive way, because this is kind of what I think a lot of people have been feeling. They don't just want a boss Runka that one shots or goes through and is unkillable and does everything all at the same time. They want actual characters that are good at dealing damage, or have supports that actually protect you and don't actually, end up soloing or being DPSs at the same time, which I'm sure certain characters kind of juggle in between. But I'm definitely looking at you, New Moon Luna. With this though, they're trying to shift to a more specialized meta where roles are more clearly separated, and this is actually, I think, a pretty good direction for the game to go through. But in addition to this, they're also working with certain mechanics, or they're working to I guess adjust certain mechanic blocking characters, where they now have, I guess, okay, let me restate this. There are a lot of mechanic blocking characters in the game right now, and when they're paired with a lot of the characters that you're trying to counter, it feels like they are impossible. This is kind of like what cleave players would use with Zio, or what Bossarunka would be used alongside other fast players or aggressive players to effectively remove the ability to counter certain non-aggressive or defensive options. With this though, they're trying to fix this by adding more universal counter tools, buff or adjust existing heroes and artifacts, which is what we've definitely seen in the past, but they've definitely now put this more into words, and now they're trying to introduce characters that don't escalate power creep, which is great, because again, you don't just want to have to pull for every single character no matter what. More than this though, they ended things by, of course, thanking us for the 7th anniversary, and all the feedback was great. And honestly, this sort of transparency alongside the balance philosophy being changed does actually feel like a real step in the right direction, especially towards actually wanting the game to succeed in a longer sense, and not just feel like every single character has to be broken, busted, and if you don't pull them, well, your account is bricked. Now, with this, they've actually also talked about the pre-ban, or rather, I guess, the infographic for the fall 2025 World Arena season. And there was, okay, honestly, though this is very helpful, I think a lot of people who played on the ladder probably know what you saw, or are familiar with what you saw. Yes, you basically had to ban Lady of the Scales in a lot of cases if you wanted a chance, or wanted to have a chance to win. But alongside this, people are also not fan of characters like Bossarunka, Harsetti, Zio in some cases. Whatever the case is, you understand what the idea behind pre-banning is, and these are basically the characters that were so insane or so undealable with that they were force banned. With this, however, there were actually a lot of different characters here at the top. This includes some of the newer characters like Witch in the Mirror Tenebria, who was definitely strong, alongside Amid, who also received, of course, an insane EE, but other characters including Freerin, Belly, and Setsuka, like some of these characters that you may or may not have expected, were definitely back on the radar, and they were very powerful. And this, I think, was pretty indicative, I think, of the season. That said, we also had some more details about first picking, or rather what people picked first, and this was also pretty funny, because effectively, if you go back and look at what the pre-bans were, this is basically the first pick characters were any of the characters that managed to, for whatever random reason, slip through. They were first picked. This, of course, obviously includes Bossarunka, Lady of the Scales, Freerin, all again characters that were very high pre-bans. But then we also saw the resurgence of certain characters like Maid Chloe, and honestly, even characters like Genesis Roz, not necessarily resurgence, but them being on this list is also cool too, as this is technically a free character. Now, overall though, the pick rates for characters I think was pretty cool. Yes, the meta definitely changed, but I think a lot of people were kind of tired of seeing some of the older characters already. And honestly, though, Freerin and Genesis Roz is not the most interesting thing in the world, nor is fighting against a completely blind team with Setsuka, we did see a number of new characters show up. We got the Spirit Eye Celine. They, we had Lone Wolf Para for a period, which as a cleave player, I was not a huge fan of, but we did also, knock Afternoon Soak Flan quite a bit down, and we did end up seeing things like Lionheart Sermia. We saw Bystander Hua, Renak. All these new characters, or newerish characters, taking the stage, I think was pretty cool, as maybe foolishly or naively, I thought that there would be no way for these former characters to be even more insane than before, with some of the former characters like Bystander Juan, things like this being introduced, but they proved me wrong. And honestly, for better or worse, having different or more varied appearances for characters, I think is really cool. Now, in addition to this, they also mentioned the league cutoffs, which I think was okay, whatever. The cutoff was about normal. Honestly, it is what it is. I don't think this necessarily plays a huge part, but they did actually mention that the first pick or the first pick rate or first pick advantage was actually pretty high compared to the last season, or rather I guess it's slightly higher, and the first pick win rate stayed around 51 to 52% compared to 48 to 49 for last pick, which again was around what they had last season. But overall, again, from what we saw, there was a lot of Lady of the Scales, Genesis Raws. There was a lot of double heal, or rather double revive compositions. There was a lot of aggression or aggressive play, and especially with the introduction of characters like Freeren and other characters like, I guess basically like the Spirit Eye Celine tech to counter Lady of the Scales. A lot of these characters ended up being way I guess more played, even though they aren't necessarily the most popular characters in the game. But I think overall, with these changes, kind of a cool season. Not necessarily my most favorite to play, as a lot of people ended up using Freeman, and I didn't have a great answer to that character in a lot of cases. I'm sure not many people did, to be honest. But overall, with this, people are now looking forward to the welfare rules, or I keep calling it welfare, the warfare rules for 2026. And what these changes are actually pretty insane, I guess, like potential changes for the future. The first thing that they change is offense now scales with injury up to 50%. And this is going to be pretty huge. Obviously, this is going to make stalling out compositions going to be or much weaker. And with the defense now, this isn't as OP as before, where it was just the defense pen, but rather now Rangers take 40% less damage, which could be pretty cool. Honestly, though I think a lot of people are probably thinking of characters like Afternoon Soak Flan being way stronger. And I don't necessarily know if she needs to be stronger, as she was already pretty good, but obviously there has definitely been a falling out of certain characters like this. And overall, even some of the openers will probably be buffed through this, which I think a lot of, I guess, Operator Cigarette or like Lua characters or Lua players would probably be happy with. In addition to this, excuse me, they're also changing the weakening effect to now have bleed, burn, and bomb effects detonate at the end of turn. This is interesting. I honestly thought they would just remove this entirely and I don't know, give some sort of effectiveness or another effect like this, like maybe reduce the attack of certain characters, but they're going along with the bomb sort of CC or like the special effect route again. This is honestly pretty cool. I don't know if this is going to be great for certain people, because again, I know some people like to stack characters like Summertime Iseria's bombs or the Pirate Captain Flan. You know, they may not want to detonate their bombs at every single period, or they're trying to stack certain things or avoid certain number of debuffs. With this, I think it's going to be an interesting buff, though. It's definitely more relevant than what the last one was, where I don't think anyone was using any of the relevant characters for that. But in addition to this, they've basically just kept the resistance or the ER effect of 100%. This is honestly maybe one of the more, I don't want to call it cringe, because I've definitely gotten myself out of a pickle a lot of times with this, but this has felt way more annoying if you're trying to play faster or if you want the game to be over quicker. Though I did actually notice this having the unintended effect of, if you are someone that is trying to debuff or trying to debuff with like a character that has no effectiveness, it does actually play quite well even for characters that don't have ER. And what I mean by this is, like, even if I don't have ER on my Spirit Eye Celine, if someone ends up trying to defense break or stun someone like my Spirit Eye Celine, this doesn't actually end up happening just because I have 100 ER to begin with. This again has definitely worked out in my favor, but overall I think this has been more annoying than before. But I get it, it's supposed to balance out all the effectiveness characters, can't really complain about that. Now, I do want to also talk about the fact that December 4th has an update, which now expands supported heroes to 16. And overall, guys, this is a pretty big or pretty cool change, or I guess like overall, a lot of these changes I think are quite relevant or quite nice for what we've seen so far. I hope in the future we end up seeing a bit more changes to these warfare rules. My God, I'm going to get it right one time. But overall, I think if the meta ends up changing, which I think it will, and you know, characters like Yulha are now dominating or showing off or showing up way more, maybe new characters in the future will change the kind of face of the game. And otherwise, I'm excited to see what they have going on. Not a insane patch or a set of adjustments. I think people were definitely waiting for more, but honestly, even this HECATE skill effect adjustment I think is pretty nice. At least they're being a bit more transparent about what they're doing, and overall, guys, yeah, I think this is a solid transparency post, though not much I think was necessarily shown off at the moment. I think it is interesting that they're obviously taking the time to remove things or listen to feedback, but if you were expecting like an explosive everything is going to change from this patch sort of update, this is definitely not it. Anyways, thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.